So what we said yesterday at the very end of the period is you can actually graph 4 plus I. And what we do is we put the real part on the x-axis and we put the imaginary part on the y-axis. Now what's the real part of this number? 4. And what's the imaginary part? Well, what's the number that's multiplied by the I? 1. So what you're going to do is you're just going to plot the point 4, 1. Okay? And if we plot the point 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and it's right there, absolute value means how far is that point away from the origin. I want to know what's that distance right there. Now, folks, if you want to plot them and graph them and do it that way every time, I do not care. I'm going to show you a shorter way. Let's look at this. And what do we know about a right triangle? What's the old guy? Pythagoras, yeah. And some of you didn't like Pythagoras, and so what did he ever do to you? Do you remember the Pythagorean theorem? What is it? Which side is the C? The hypotenuse. The longest. Good. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's do it. What's a? So 4 squared plus 1 squared equals c squared. What do we get? 16 plus 1? Right? So what is c? Now, normally we would say c is plus or minus the square root of 17. Why am I not going to say minus the square root of 17 here? Why does it have to be positive? Because it represents what? Distance. Can distance be negative? No, distance cannot be negative. Any of you ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Of course.
You got it. If you haven't seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you got to see Ferris Bueller. Well, they get Dad's car, very, very nice sports car. I can't remember, it's a Corvette. I can't remember. Ferrari, and they get it out and they drive it, and they're not supposed to. So they get it back in the garage and they put it up on blocks and put it in reverse to try to get the odometer to go backwards. Okay, it doesn't do that. Odometer doesn't go backwards. They're just too goofy to know. Here's my question to you. Could I have come up with this without doing a graph? Could I have looked at this original problem and gone here without the graph? You betcha. So, what if I give you, what is the absolute value of negative 2 plus 3i? What's a? Negative 2. A is negative 2. What's b? What am I going to do to those? I'm going to Pythagorean theorem those things. Because I'm looking for the distance. So Pythagorean theorem says a squared. What's a squared? Square it. Plus b squared equals c squared. Finish it. 13 equals c squared. So the distance of that point away from the origin is the square root of 13. That's the absolute value. Sure. Or you could just graph them. Yep. Now, go into your notebook. On page is 40-ish, 41. Page 41. Now, you have a little bit of stuff there, correct?
Yes.
Wherever you stopped, right below that, I want you to write absolute value of a complex number. We're going to do a little practice. Number one. What's the absolute value of 2 plus I? We're going to do 3 problems, okay? Absolute value means distance. I'm looking for the distance of that point away from the origin. So I'm going to do Pythagorean theorem. What's A?
4.
A is 2. What's B? So I'm going to Pythagorean theorem those. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Yeah, 5 equals C squared. So C is the square root of 5. That's the absolute value of that complex number. Good. I'm glad you think so. Question? Okay, let's go on. Number 2. Let's do absolute value of 3 minus 6i. You do this one. What is A? 3. What's B? B is negative 6. Now remember, Pythagoras said his theorem was A squared plus B squared. So what's A squared? 9 plus, what's B squared? What's negative 6 times negative 6? 36. This will never be negative. Ever, never, ever, never. What do you get? You get C squared equals 45. You get C equals square root of 45. 3 times the square root of 5. What? One more. One more. Number 3. Absolute value of negative 4i. What's the real part of this number? Remember, every complex number looks like this. The A is the real part. The A is not multiplied by I. What's A? The A is 0. Look, this is the same as 0 minus 4i. There's not a real part because there's not a number that's not multiplied by I. So your A is 0. What's your B? Your B is negative 4. Now you can finish it.
I kind of was on the right track. I just did it as like that as the real number.
Well, yeah. A squared plus B squared is C squared. Hey, C squared equals 16. What's C? 4. C is not square root of 4. The square root of 16 is 4, period, 4. Now, I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 10 minutes. 10 minutes. It ain't going to be 20 today, I guarantee you that. I'm going to give you until 5 after 9 to finish last night's homework. You should be able to do now the absolute value on the back. Top of your page 42. Dividing complex numbers. I'm sorry? Listen, you're going to have a quiz on Monday. Yeah, don't even. You're going to have a quiz on Monday. Complex numbers. I. So, listen. We're going to spend the first part, bless you, We're going to spend the first part of the period reviewing. We're just going to go over everything, all right, and then take the quiz. Huh? Yeah, anything that could have that has an I in it. Yeah. Listen, you have added and subtracted and multiplied complex numbers. We haven't divided them. But listen to me, dividing complex numbers is the same as dividing square roots. Well, I couldn't divide square roots either. Yeah. You don't need to write this down, but let's review. Review. This is review. If we do 3 divided by the square root of 2, remember, some dude said you can't leave square root in the bottom. And so how do we get rid of a square root in the bottom? Multiply by what? There you go. We're going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. Say again? Correct. So what's the top? The top is 3 times the square root of 2. You can if you want. You don't have to. What's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? Square root of 4, which is 2. Guys, that technique, you use the same technique with imaginary numbers. Same thing. Let's try this. Write this one down. 3 divided by I. I'm sorry? Well, I don't know. Now, you cannot have an imaginary number in the denominator. Why? I don't know. It's the same guy that figured out you can't have a square root in the denominator. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by what? By I. Now, what is 3 times I? It's 3I. And what's I times I? I squared, but what's I squared? What's 3I divided by negative 1? Negative 3I. Okay. All right, that was your number 1. That was your number 1. Number 2. Number 2. Negative 7 divided by 6I. Correct. Well, that's what we need to decide. What if this had been, let's go back to review. What if this had been this? I just have to multiply by square root of 2. If I had multiplied by 6 times the square root of 2, I would have just had a lot of simplifying to do later. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to do this. So I'm just going to multiply top and bottom by I. Hey, question. How many terms are in the denominator? 1. There's just 1 term in the denominator. So multiply top and bottom by I. Ah, very good. I'm hearing some good stuff over here. What's the numerator? Now look at the denominator. 6 times I times I. I times I is I squared. I squared is negative 1. Negative 1 times 6. What's a, yeah, I can too. What's a negative divided by a negative? It's a positive, so this is just 7I divided by 6. Wait. Because a negative divided by a negative is a positive.
But you did the negative.
Huh?
You don't have to divide it. You should know that.
If I give you negative 3 divided by negative 4, what do I get? What's a negative divided by a negative? I'm not multiplying.
Wait, what?
That's what I wonder. What?
3 divided by 4.
Huh?
Because it's so like so
Yeah.
divided.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. What he said.
So why can't you just leave negative because the answer is going to be positive at the end?
Number 3. I got it. No, you don't. Okay, number 3. 1 divided by negative I. Negative I is the same thing as, right? True, true. So really, this is what your denominator is, isn't it? What do you need to multiply by, top and bottom? Just by I. Just by the I. What's the numerator? Numerator is 1 times I, which is I. It's going to be negative I squared. Negative I squared. But what's I squared? Negative 1. So this is the opposite of negative 1, which is 1. So it's I divided by 1. But what's anything divided by 1? Itself. A lot of steps just to get I. Well, all right. Number have mercy. Number 4. Have mercy. Oh, 2I divided by 5I squared.
Divided by I squared.
Or 1.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, you have to get rid of both the i's, so I squared.
I don't have to multiply by jack here. Because what's I squared?
Oh, negative 1.
I squared is negative 1. This is 2I divided by what? Negative 1 times 5. I don't have an I in the bottom. Don't make it harder than it is. Okay? If you had multiplied top and bottom by I squared, you'd have gotten the same answer. You'd have just had a bunch of simplifying to do. Okay? It's dumb. Well, I'm sorry you think it's dumb. Okay. Now, you're going to try. Okay? Huh? No, I'm going to give you some problems to do. You think you're ready? Okay.
I said it.
Okay, what would this be, number 5?
Yes.
5? 5? 6 divided by 5I. You're going to do 3 problems. Yeah, Negative 2 divided by 7I squared. And 5 divided by negative 3I. Now listen, I saw this. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So you get, shut up, you get 6I over. I squared is negative 1 times 5. Now, some of you are doing this. Why are you doing that?
That's a no-go.
Yeah, that's a no-go. This is a positive divided by a negative. That doesn't change anything. You didn't, yeah. Hey, I sat on a stool in the cafeteria for 3.5 hours last night at parent conferences. Okay, about 7.
But that was a lot of fun.
Wait, what? Oh.
Well, I got a lot of tests. I got my pre-cal test graded, which is good. Look at number 6. What's number 6? What do you do number 6? Where do you get a negative 1? Good, because I squared is negative 1. This is negative 1. This is negative 2 divided by
7.
negative 7. But why is that 2/7?
Because
It's negative.
Because it's a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive.
So, for 7, yeah, you get 5i over 3.
I get 5i over negative 3i squared, right? But what's I squared? And what's negative 1 times negative 3? So this is 5i over 3. Yep. 5i over 3. Now, top of the next page, we are on page 43. 43. We got one more. What is that? We got one more thing to talk about. Just one. Just one more thing.
What page is this going on?
43.
No, I hope you don't.
Review. This is review. Do you remember how to divide like this? How many terms are in the denominator? 2. I can't have a square root in the denominator, but I can't just multiply by square root of 2 because I got a binomial in the denominator. What do I multiply by? Anybody remember? 3 minus the square root of 2. What's that called? Conjugate. And I multiply the top and the bottom of that bad boy by 3 minus the square root of 2. And what is the purpose of that?
Oh, okay.
What's the purpose? So when I get finished, what do I not have in the denominator? A square root. Because that one dude, it's all that one dude's fault. Now,
Wait,
oh no, dude, go.
6
6.
minus 2.
If you're talking about something besides this, shut your mouth. Okay,
I have a question.
just a second. Just a second. 9. You don't even have to write this down. What's this plus this? 11. It's 0. It's 0.
11.
11.
Square root of 2.
Right. Is it plus 2 or minus 2?
Minus 2, so it equals 7.
So it equals 7.
Oh my god.
7. What? How does what equal 7? I got the 9 came from right here.
And then 4 came from this read.
Folks, we do I's exactly the same way, okay? Exactly the same way. So, on your page 43, number 1, 2 divided by 1 plus I. Okay, shush yourself. Here we go. How many terms do I have in the denominator? I got 2. Look at that. So I got a binomial in the denominator and I got an I in it. I got to do a conjugate. What's the conjugate? 1 minus I. You bet your boots. It's 1 minus I. 1 minus I. I know, you know. Yeah, that's all I need. That's all I need. Please don't.
Did you redo that one?
Okay.
I'm just puzzled on the
Numerator. Numerator.
2 minus 2i.
Is he right?
Yeah.
He says 2 minus 2i.
I just don't get the bottom part.
Okay. What's the question, Jordan? What are we talking about the denominator? Oh, okay, I ain't there yet. Here. 1 times 1? Now, what's this? No, what's 1 times negative I? That's negative 1I. What's I times 1? What do those do? Now, plus or minus. Hey, what's plus or minus? So, let's talk about that denominator. This is 1 minus negative 1. So, oh my word. Oh my word. Okay, now take a look. Shush, shush. This is 2 minus 2I divided by 2, right? Now, now look here. You have to decide, will that simplify? Not to 0. Does the numerator have a GCF? 2. If we factor a 2 out of the GCF, 2 out of the numerator, what are we left with? On a simple one like this, I would expect you to go on. Don't even tell me you can't look at that and tell that there's a 2 in common in that. Don't even tell me that. 1 minus I. Have mercy. Have mercy. I'm going to give you 2 more problems. Shh. 2 more problems. We're going to talk together about how to start it, and then I'm going to let you finish them. If you can finish them, I will go ahead and give you your homework. If you're struggling to finish them, we'll practice a little more.
We won't tell anybody if you
This, okay. Number 2. And number 3. Go. Look at the first one.
I got this.
How many terms are in the denominator? Binomial. Does any of that binomial have an I in it? Yes. So you're going to have to multiply by what's called the conjugate. What conjugate are we going to multiply by on the top? 4 minus 2I. Good. Look at the second one. Well, the third one. Look at number 3. I have a binomial in the denominator. I is part of it. What do I need to multiply by? Hello? I've got a binomial, so I'm going to have to do a conjugate if I've got a binomial. Times 2 plus I. Now,